The Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. Well, let's begin this talk by standing up. So, standing mountain. And just notice the body, that is how it feels and how it's aligned. And the breath. And then using the mind, create this connection, establish this connection between the center of the earth, up through the body, up into the universe. And also bringing attention to the still point in the belly and in the heart. Standing mountain is where we stiffen the hands and arms just a little bit. And then let the out-breath carry us downwards. The out-breath carries us down into our roots, which are this planet, and into the past, into the deep past, which we carry in our bodies. And then releasing the tension in the arms and hands. And if you would, just bring to mind your favorite tree, or a tree you saw recently, or a tree that has spoken to you in some way. And feel the presence, the uprightness of that tree in the uprightness and the rootedness of this standing body. And know that the trees are breathing with us when their leaves are out in their own way. And so let's now just gently and slowly move into your sitting posture. So just find your posture. Let your posture find you. Dharma talks can activate the mind a lot. So we're going to pause, and I invite you to pause whenever you need to bring the body and the breath into harmony with the mind. And you do that by maybe adjusting a little bit, moving a little, maybe checking your breath, and just bring that harmony into presence while your mind is being activated. Let's have the images, please, Drew. So a Zen master who has passed on, named Roshi Uchiyama, pointed this out. This is Rodin's The Thinker. And just so you know, I'm a big fan of Rodin. Notice the posture. This is a sitting meditator. Notice the posture. The thinker is all curled up, bent at the waist, head looking down, arm is bent, wrist is bent, fingers are bent, toes are bent. This is the posture of thinking. This is the posture of meditation. This is the posture of meditation. Connection between earth and what the ancients called heaven or the cosmos. Bringing together, concentrating the wisdom of the body, the impermanence of the breath, the upright spine, which has evolved over billions of years, and the intention, connection to the ancestors, connection to the cosmos, to the net of Indra, all here. That David mentioned concentration. This means all elements together in this moment. The thinker is caught in the mind. The thinker even forms kind of a circle, ruminating. How are the problems going to be solved? How am I going to figure my way out of this mess? While this one is being in the present moment, utilizing the wisdom of the body. What's the wisdom of the body? So it's kind of a blow to the ego to hear that about 90% of our brain is used to regulate the body. That's mostly what it does. When we eat a sandwich, we don't think, okay, now I'm going to secrete these juices and we're going to, it does it, right? We don't think, oh, I better keep beating the heart. Or if we get sick or we get a cut, we're not going to say, okay, all you white blood cells, I want you to all collect. And we don't have to do that because the mind's already doing it. And in fact, that kind of mind, the body mind, is very ancient and is not separate from the very wisdom that created the galaxies. It's the same. It's much greater than this prefrontal cortex can come up with. So we bring along the body, the wisdom of the body. How about creating a baby? Can we do that? Can we think our way through that? Get all the engineers together, the software people, you know. The body does that. The universe does that through the body. That's the wisdom of the body. What a resource. You know? So this one is utilizing all that. This one is stuck up here. If we're lost, or I should say, when we're lost in thought, we can't bring our attention to bear for those we love. I can't love you because I'm too distracted. Come back later. I'm thinking about all this stuff. I'm worrying about all this stuff. I'm afraid of, I'm not, come back later, maybe. I'll be ready later. That's when we take a breath and we call on that deep wisdom of the body that's been here as long as the mountains, as long as the trees. And we say, help me out a little bit. And we let go. And then the problem recedes in importance, and we're present. I wonder if you felt, for me, it was on the first day in the afternoon. Did you feel when this group coalesced? There was maybe you felt this a number of times. There was just this, David and Jan and I have talked about this quality of stillness that just arises naturally through the wisdom of all these body minds here. And so, you might realize this Dharma talk started with the first Qigong. This is a continuation of it. And when we say body, breath, and mind, it includes heart. Okay, mind in the Dharma, mind includes heart. And it reminds me, Richie Davidson told this story about when he first went over to Dharamsala, to India, to put the monitors on and to actually graph and see what's happening in the brain of a meditator. You're familiar with all this neuroscience. Thank you. All the monks and nuns were there watching, and they put the cap on with all the electrodes, and they're all buzzing and laughing and pointing at, and because, and he says, well, what's funny? And they said, well, that's not where the mind is. The mind is here. That's just the head. And Jan referred to this as manas and chitta. This is the body mind, the heart. Okay. They've vanished. That's okay. So let's just pause for a moment now. Take a breath. How's the body? How's the posture? Is the tree here? I want to mention a little bit the tree. David alluded to this briefly. The tree is the companion of the Buddha. So in the life story, the mythology of the Buddha's life, and I'm talking about the historical Buddha, the Buddha was born under a shala tree. And it's said that his mother gave birth holding a branch, standing up. How about that? Born under the shala tree, shula tree, excuse me, which is a beautiful tree that has these kind of pink-white blossoms, a very big tree. And then it next appears, the tree does, when the Buddha was a child, and some say maybe around 9 years old. And the story is of the rose apple tree. And that's a tree native to India that bears a fruit. And the story is that there was the annual festival in the village of planting. So it must have been after the rainy season, probably early in the spring. And the Buddha as a child was sitting underneath this rose apple tree. And there was music, and there was dancing, and there were drums, and there was food. And then the plowman appeared with the ox and, cut the first furrow in the ground, right by the young Siddhartha. And the boy could see the worms, and the worms that had been cut in half, and the roots of the plants that had been uprooted. And the birds started coming and eating the worms and fighting over the worms. And the oxen was groaning, and the plowman was straining. And in that moment, this child went into samadhi, went into an awakened state spontaneously, in the midst of the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows, in the midst of the turning of the earth and the suffering in the world. Sitting under the rose apple tree, this child attained awakening. So the story goes. And I think we all do that. I think children experience moments of harmony and stillness and awakening pretty often. Maybe that's happened to you. Maybe you can remember that. Because the Buddha remembered it. And the story is he went off and left to the comforts of home and searched for years to find the way to be with suffering, or the path through suffering. And tried all of the different techniques that were being taught by the various wandering sadhus of the day, and didn't feel satisfied. So said, well, I'm going to sit where? Under this big fig tree. This fig tree, which is now called the Bodhi tree. Sat beneath the tree for 7 days. And the key to the awakening, one of them, was the recollection of this childhood experience of awakening. And I think this is why it's written that the Buddha said, when I awakened, I awakened for all beings. Meaning that the capacity to awaken is inherent, is intrinsic, is inborn in all beings. This child hadn't studied the Dharma, it didn't exist. It just arose, right? Just like the tree blossoms, the mind awakens. And recalling that was what opened up the Buddha to this amazing insight. And the Buddha proceeded to teach for, I think, about 35 years. And when it was time to go, when, as they say, passed into parinirvana, when the Buddha died, it was beneath 2 shula trees that were dropping their petals. And I think that there's aesthetically and symbolically, there's a lot of reason why the tree is always with the Buddha. And I did a little checking, and actually human beings share 50% of our DNA with trees. We're half tree. 50%. So we've done the Qigong. We've felt down into our roots, to our ancient roots of life arising out of this planet, body arising out of this planet, to the roots of our DNA, our ancestors that are present in this body, present in this mind, in this moment. A complete continuation, a continuum, unbroken for billions of years. And the trunk, the belly, the still point in the belly, the still point in the heart, this human life, the expansion, the connection, the relationships through space and time, this life, this lifetime, this impermanent body and mind, and the branches, how we reach upwards, how we reach out, how we radiate and express this precious life force energy that is who we are. We're not really very different from the trees. The trees move toward the light. There was an experiment done just last year by a woman, a botanist, who was a professor. I can't remember where. It seems like it was out east. Anyway, you familiar with Pavlov's dog experiment? This is classic, where, you know, that when he would give the dog, just before giving the dog food, would ring a bell, the dog would slobber, you know, and as dogs do, although mine does. And then he would eat the food, and, you know, and then after a while he would just ring the bell and the dog would salivate. So this proved that the dog associated, and the dog was able to learn. Well, all of us who love dogs know that anyway, but it convinced the scientists. So what she did is she did the same experiment with a plant, with a bean. She just planted a bean, and a little bean plant. Now, the plant wants to go to the sun, so she put the plant by, you know, a light source. But before turning on the light source, she put a tiny little electric fan, and it blew on the plant, because the plant couldn't hear like the dog. So, and the plant felt that little breeze, and then she put the light, and the plant would go this way. Okay. Well, after a while, she just put the breeze on, the little fan on, no light, plant went that way. Put it over here, it goes that way. Whoa. They're all conscious, folks. They're all conscious. The plants are conscious. There's a wonderful book written recently about the consciousness of trees, which is actually in their roots. They're not only individually conscious, they're collectively conscious. 50% of our DNA, same thing, right? How are they conscious? They don't have eyes or ears, but they feel. This is why, as David mentioned, this is an embodied practice. They feel. So what I mean by that is, if you're a tree, and you are, and you're sending a root down, and that root hits a rock, it's going to say, oh, rock, and it goes around it, doesn't it? It knows. And it says, oh, I'm getting shaded off over here. I think I'll grow this way. It knows. How does it know? Because it feels. And I don't know this, but I expect that its sense of feeling, and your cat's sense of feeling, and the bean plant sense of feeling, and is the same as our sense of feeling. I expect that's true. That's why when we go into the body, what we're doing is we're going into feelings, aren't we? Right? We can feel. That was the first sense. When the one-celled creatures first evolved, they couldn't see or hear, but they could feel. It's that deep. It's that deep. It's the wisdom of the body in the feeling. And English is a clunky language, but in one way, it's really fortunate that the word in English for feeling, sensing, that is touching, is the same as emotions. Remember, you're a little kid and you say, oh, he hurt my feelings. Literally, yes. It's in the body. The emotions are in the body. Okay. So let's return to the body. Body, breath, and mind in harmony. I had a dream last week. And in the dream, there was this kind of familiar spiritual teacher who tends to show up uninvited once in a while in my dream. And this being looked at me with compassion and said, I know you're suffering. I know your mind goes crazy sometimes. I know it just runs. I know you get distracted. I know your body gets tense. I know all of this. He said, but remember, your amazing species is still evolving. You know, the being was saying, you're really not there yet. You know, don't expect too much. It's been a long ride. And we're kind of just beginning to awaken. This is also a model of the triune brain. You're familiar with this? So the first brain that evolved, they call a reptilian brain, which is just based on survival. You know, so you think of a lizard or a fish, the brain is monitoring and causing the functioning of the body so they can survive. That's what it's for. The fish aren't studying the Dharma, right? They're not inventing mathematics. They're surviving. They have this much, the first one. Okay. And then as time went on, and I'm talking eons, then the brain, I'm talking the brain itself, then the next part grew. And that's the mammalian brain, the limbic brain. And this is an add-on to the survival brain. So my dog is one of my best friends, and he has a tremendous range of emotion. If you have a dog, the dog gets sad, it gets happy, it gets worried, it gets scared. It has emotions. If you're familiar with horses, very, very emotional animals. Elephants, the mammals, particularly the social animals, tend to really have a lot of emotion, just like we do. And there have been experiments done with dogs on this, and they evoke emotions in dogs and they map where it lights up in the brain, and lo and behold, it's exactly the same place that our mammalian brain lights up with that same emotion. It's the same. Okay. And then very recently, like yesterday, the prefrontal cortex grew, evolved. You know about neuroplasticity, right? You know about brain studies with a meditation, and that meditation actually physically changes the brain. You know this. Well, this is what's happening. The brain is growing and it's evolving. It's becoming more complex. And every time it grows, it expands. Okay. And so when you're meditating, they say, well, you're meditating for yourself and you're meditating for all beings. Well, what does that mean? This is how it grows. Through individuals' experience and through collective experience, we're actually growing the brain. I don't know what the Buddha's brain looked like. Rick Hanson's done a lot of studies on this. He wrote a book called Buddha's Brain. What does a brain look like when it's in samadhi? And it's a real thing. It's a real vibratory, harmonious state of body and mind and breath united in one thing. So we're actively participating in this. Okay. But we're works in progress. This is what this dream was saying. Don't be too hard on yourself, right? This is, as Jan said, this takes effort. This takes discipline. And we're going to fall down. And we're going to get up. And we're going to fall down. We're going to get up. And this is the way we move forward. This is bodhicitta. This is the mind of love, the heart, body, mind of love that is arising just like the sap in the spring. It's, if you have an acorn, bodhicitta is the oak tree in the acorn. All of it's there. All it needs is the correct conditions to manifest, and it will manifest. This is the correct condition. This Sangha, this room, this Dharma, this posture, this breath, this ancient way is how we refine the chi. Remember yesterday we did the refining the chi? We didn't create this. We're being created by it, by participating in this awakening of consciousness. So let's just pause a minute. Reharmonize body, breath, and mind. There's a lot of stuff coming at you here. All right, it's a lot. And we're all going to forget this, most of it. But the body and the breath and the mind still be here. Feel the body. Have gratitude for the breath. Notice the mind. When the harmony arises, there's a little smile. This is what Thich Nhat Hanh, he was always smiling at you because he was there. He was here. So the smile was just natural. Same with the Buddha. The Buddha's depicted smiling a lot. In the Dharma, there's no mention of original sin. So the Dalai Lama was perplexed. Someone long ago asked him a question, and his translator translated for him, and he didn't understand. The question had to do with, I just really feel I'm no good. It's just what keeps coming up for me is I'm just not good enough. I'm just no good. The Dalai Lama didn't understand that. He said, what? And the translator and went back and forth. Finally, he said, oh, he said, that's not true. That's an idea. That's not reality. That's an idea. We can believe it or not believe it. But what the body's telling us is that this survival brain is why we're here. And this emotional brain is why we're connected. Greed arises out of survival instinct. Is the squirrel greedy when she collects a nut and stores it? Is that greed? I don't think so. That's what squirrels do. That's instinct. That's survival. Okay? When the wolf pack attacks an elk and tears it apart, is that violence and aggression? Or is that instinct? That's the way it works. Delusion. Animals don't know that they're going to die. I think that's most of them. I think more advanced ones probably do, like elephants and so on. But greed, hatred, and delusion have arisen so that we may survive. And you may be a pacifist, or someone may be a vegetarian against war and so on. And in this very moment, in your body, there is a war going on. You have an army of white blood cells that are guarding and protecting and attacking and killing, invading organisms. That's how we live. That doesn't mean that we're bad. The tendency to be violent is what I encountered up in the Boundary Waters when the mother bear and her cubs walked into my camp. The mother bear wasn't bad. She was being a bear. So all of these tendencies that have enabled us to survive as a species and proliferate, 8 billion of us, all of this is here. It's how we manage it. And Thich Nhat Hanh has a poem about this. It's very famous, called Call Me by My True Names. I'm just going to read a little bit of it. He says, I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river. And I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds on the frog. And he goes on to say later in the poem, and I am the sea pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. And this is what he's pointing to. When we get out of this illusion of separate self, and for a moment we merge with universal life, universal chi, we are all these things. Just as Thay says, that's our true identity. And then he points to the evolving consciousness that this criminal, this sea pirate, is one of us too, but has not yet learned that the heart and mind are one, and that what I do affects you, and that affects, has not yet learned that, but will. There's an implied sense here that that will happen. It's just that that human has not evolved to that point yet. And so what he's telling us, I think, is that this is how we move on. Here's another quote. Humans arose through nature's rapturous, orgasmic creativity and diversity, the overwhelming power of 10,000 seeds on one tree, of everything eating everything else, parasites, cancers in the biological world, volcanoes, earthquakes in the physical world. Human violence pales in comparison to nature's. This is the lotus arising out of the mud. This is where we blossom. Just as the Buddha, as a child, realized the presence of suffering in the world, the worms, the birds, and so on. It is in the midst of that awareness that awakening appeared. Even in a body that's at war, protecting itself all the time. The Buddha's body was doing that too. So the fruits of this maelstrom, the fruits of this tree. I want to mention just a little bit, because in tree and spring, we come up, we bring our attention up and then out, right? And this is the branches, the leaves, but then we stiffen the fingers a little and we do ESP, extended sensory perception. We extend out our consciousness, way up, way out, and it connects to the net of Indra. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the net of Indra, this is an image that actually comes out of the yogic tradition, the Hindu tradition, a little prior to the Buddha. And it's talked about in the Flower Garland Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra. And the net, Indra, I should say first, Indra was sort of the top god or goddess, the top deity. So sort of looked around and saw everything. And as Bernie Glassman tells us, it was Indra's birthday. And so Indra said, I need a gift. So Indra called the top architect and said to her, I want you to come up with something really beautiful. And the architect said, okay. Came back a million years later and had created the net of Indra. Well, what is that? This is a visual image of what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. So it's this vast net, this vast network. And everywhere that the strands of the net intersect, there's a jewel, some say a pearl or a diamond. And the jewel reflects every other jewel in the entire net. And the net is not static, it's constantly evolving. Moment to moment to moment, it's changing, growing connection. And it's this visualization of this vast interconnectedness of this body, this being, this mind, this breath, interconnected to all that is. And when you visualize, or when you do this tree and spring, you extend out and up, left, right, front, back, all directions, and you then are the jewel in the net of Indra, not separate from all that is. Now let's pause just for a moment and embody the roots of the body, the roots of DNA, the roots of evolution, the presence of this body here. Loosen it up a little, be kind to it, let it be flexible. Feel the breath. our connection out into the universe, to all that is. This is who we are. There's a Native American Ojibwe saying, it goes something like, I go about pitying myself when all the while I'm being carried on the wings of a great bird through the sky. And we are. We're being carried. We're being carried by this expansion, this evolution, this diversification. We're being carried by the breath. And we're being carried when we release our path to the Dharma. And we bring the Dharma to our lives. Each one of us is going to manifest these practices and these teachings and this ancient way in a unique pattern of your life. So the last thing about the tree is that it bears fruit. There's a fig tree. Fig tree. Figs are sweet, delicious. What are the fruits that you carry? What are the fruits of your practice? What do you have to offer from your basket? What do you have to offer to us? We are individually and collectively the fruits of this tree. This tree. This ancestral tree, this evolutionary tree. This tree, the companion of the Buddha. This tree with which we share 50% of our DNA. What are the fruits of your tree? And can we see each other as fruits of the big tree, still evolving, ripening? The teachers talk about ripening our practice. That's exactly what it is. And we are being ripened just as the fruits on the fruit tree are being ripened by the sun, by the tree, by the nourishment of the earth. We are the fruits, and we're still ripening. When you come to contact with suffering in the world, with violence, with racism, with hatred, when you come into contact with it and you shake your head and you drop into despair and you say, how can we be here and do this when we're screwing up so badly? And we're to the edge of the pit of despair. I'm a social worker in a middle school, and there's an endless line of children who need my help, and I can't serve them all. 20,000 inmates in our prison system in this state. 20,000. And we go in there with our little groups and our little one-on-one meetings. And we can't serve them all. We will be destroyed if we drop into that abyss of suffering. As Jan said, we need to develop our stability, our strength, our fruits, our gifts, so that we can then share them in our engaged practice. And when we feel that darkness coming in, when it's too much, when it's starting to feel overwhelming, body, breath, and mind. In the midst of this maelstrom, body, breath, and mind. Bring in the roots, bring in the wisdom of the body, be aware of the net of Indra, of this evolving consciousness. O you of noble birth, know that you are the fruit of the Dharma. And all you can do is to remain as best you can in balance in the midst of all of this suffering. And in fact, it's the only way to awaken is in the presence of the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. If we think maybe if we move to Florida or go on a cruise ship and get away from all this, then we can awaken. Or maybe we have to sit in a cave for 40 years. Then we can awaken. Awakened mind is as close as the warmth and tingling of this body. Right here, right now. It just requires an in-breath and an out-breath.